Here's a few defenses I'm going to look to add on the waiver wire heading into Week 14. The first defense is the New York Giants. The Giants defense, what a ball game they played versus the Seattle Seahawks, and they surprised them and shocked them and beat them. 10 points allowed, 5 sacks, and a fumble recovery. What a game it was, like I said. They had 13 fantasy points. That's really solid to go out there in Seattle and only give up 10 points. And this defense, they were getting to Wilson early and often. They were making plays. They were playing a good zone coverage. And Judge, he's got these guys playing well and playing hard. And this Giant defense, they're available in 85% of fantasy leagues. And their team I could almost use each and every week now after going into Seattle like that and dominating the line. This is a team's defense you got to take serious. And they've scored a lot of fantasy points now and consistency since Week 9. And next week they got Arizona, another team that Kyler Murray, he holds on to the ball a lot. The Giants, I think they could get sacks in that game and maybe even a house call for a pick six. So go out there and get the Giants. Second defense is the team versus the Giants, the Arizona Cardinals. Colt McCoy, he didn't look great in this game. He didn't make bad plays as well, but he's a conservative quarterback. Seattle, they still had a good fantasy defensive game. So right now, Arizona, they gave up a lot of points to the Rams. Versus the Giants, I think it could be a better game for them. The Giants give up 10th most fantasy points to defense, and this could be a low-scoring game next week here in Week 14, so I would take a shot on Arizona. They're available in 80% of fantasy leagues, so why not? If it's going to be a decent defensive game, and it's going to be in New York where the weather's probably going to be cold and windy, then this is a game I would take both defenses. And they're available, like I said, in 80 and 85% of leagues. The next defense, the Atlanta Falcons, believe it or not, I'm going to take a look at and try to get. The Falcons, they've been playing a little better of late. This week they gave up 21 points, 2 sacks, and a fumble recovery. Nothing special, but next week they got a good matchup versus the Chargers, where their offense, they look lost now the last 2 weeks. They struggled in Buffalo's, the Chargers. They put up a piss-poor performance versus the Patriots, scoring no points. And Herbert, he looked flustered. He threw 2 windows. So this is a defense I'm going to target just for this week only because they're versing the Chargers. And the Chargers, they give up a lot of fantasy points to teams, the 13th most. So they're middle of the pack. I think they could get some points here. And we saw New England have a 40-point fantasy day versus the Chargers. I don't think the Falcons will do that good, but I could see them definitely hit double digits. And the Falcons did have a big game in Week 12 with 30 fantasy points that day, so we'll see what they could do. And their team, no one's really going to claim, so you don't got to put a claim in, and you could go out there and get them. The next defense I'm looking to add here, you could get them right now before the game starts on Tuesday night, and that's the Carolina Panthers. They got a good matchup versus the Denver Broncos, who give up the 3rd most fantasy points to defenses. And this is only a 1-week thing where I'll target the Panthers. They're available in 95% of leagues. They're not doing much. But like I said, it's a matchup-based thing. And the Panthers, their defense only played 1 great game this season. And that was versus the Detroit Lions, where they shut them out a few weeks ago. In Week 11, where they had 26 fantasy points, was Carolina. So we'll see what they could do. Like I said, they're available in 95% of leagues, and they're not a team that's not bad to get here with this good matchup versus Denver. The 5th and final defense I'm looking to add here on waivers is the Washington football team. What a ball game this defense played versus Big Ben and that Steeler offense, and to win and beat the 11-0 Steelers. This defense, they're always around the ball. They could add more intos in this game, but they had the closing out into on that last drive by John Bostic. But this group's a crazy front 7 that's hard for offensive lines to stop. And this is why this Washington football team's on a 3-game winning streak. This defense, I know their fantasy points weren't great in this one. They only had 7, but to do that versus a Pittsburgh offense is good. They had a couple sacks and an into and only 17 points allowed. So this Washington football team now, they got a pretty good matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers next week, and they're a team available in 75% of fantasy leagues, and they're a team you should go out there and get, and they can help you win in your playoff game next week for sure, I believe. So that's 5 defenses I'm looking to add heading into week 14 and the playoffs of fantasy football.